Hello and welcome to Every Horror Movie on Netflix, the show where we watch and review and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. I'm back, sounding much better. It's Chris, and I'm here with Patrick.
Hello.
And Steven.
Hello.
And it must be the season of the witch because Allison's back.
You got to pick up every stitch.
Allison with a Y.
Whoa, whoa.
Our very special friend.
Very special.
Welcome.
Welcome
Thank you.
back, Allison.
It's so good to be back.
What's going on, guys? How y'all doing?
Good. We've been doing some fucking horror-ass shit. Speaking of witches, Allison.
The Oscars. That's pretty horrifying.
Oh, yeah, horror-ass shit. That was some horror-ass shit.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Okay, so we figured this out last night. We missed the opening number of the Oscars, and then we went back and watched it. And it was pretty dope. Like, Janelle Monáe came out in a Mr. Rogers costume and sang, I think, an original song. I had never heard it before. And there were dancers on stage costumed in outfits related to different movies that came out this year, and there were two big like horror movie references in the outfits. There were people in like Us costumes, and there were also like Midsummer costumes. Janelle had like a fucking flower crown on at one point. I was like, all right, this is a pretty dope reference to a movie that otherwise is not being recognized by this award ceremony.
It's like when the little kids came out before the Super Bowl wearing the Lions jerseys and the Titans jerseys.
Lions weren't in the Super Bowl.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
They weren't represented otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally baffling to me that neither of those movies garnered a single nomination.
Well,
not even for like set design, production design, sound design.
Yeah, the only like even horror movie from last year that got any kind of nomination was The Lighthouse, and it got one nomination.
And it deserved that award. I mean, Roger
so much
Deakins
more.
deserves all the awards, but that deserved an award for cinematography. The amount of effort that went into making that thing look the way it did is insane.
Absolutely.
Parasite is borderline horror, which I was delighted to see it pick up so many awards. But yeah, Midsummer, I mean, say what you will about Midsummer, there's a diversity of opinions about it around this table. We haven't gotten into it on the podcast before, but it's a beautiful looking fucking movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, gorgeously done. Fucking anyways, yeah, the horror of the Oscars aside.
Yeah, we could literally, I know this group could talk about the Oscars
But we
all
won't
day.
do that to
All
you.
night.
I love that we've now had 2 episodes in a row where Chris just dropped a just sick, like, deadpan joke about the fictional Super Bowl, and it just went over my head both times. This is an odd trend now.
Shows how little we care.
Yeah. Steven, what horror have you been fucking watching?
I've been watching the horror of my life unfold before me every day
Relatable.
for the past 2 weeks, as I'm sure most of you have. No, I've watched some good stuff lately. Most recently, I watched Ant Timpson's directorial debut, Come to Daddy. He's the guy who produced the ABC's of Death movies. He's kind of a cult figure in New Zealand. I think he was like I don't know if you guys know Fantastic Fest. I've always wanted to go, but he's one of the guys who helped curate that. This is an Elijah Wood, Stephen McHattie movie about Elijah Wood's kind of like a young hipster DJ. He gets a letter from his estranged father who left him when he was 5 to visit him out in the middle of nowhere in his weird kind of UFO from the 60s looking house.
It's like the Father's Day episode of the Holidays.
Oh, God.
Oh, you didn't watch it.
Holidays.
You didn't see Holidays.
Oh, wait, which was Father's? I was thinking
Jocelyn
Mother's Day.
Donahue.
I don't remember
Where
it now.
she gets the call.
Oh, yeah, fuck that.
It is a very funny movie. It is very well directed. It is gnarly as fuck. And all I can say about it is this is a movie that has a lot of major twists and turns. The trailer really only represents maybe the first third of it. But relationships are tested and things are not what they seem.
It sounds dope. I love things from New Zealand. I love Elijah Wood, and I love things about Daddy. So
I love it when relationships turn out not to be as they seem.
Yeah. So I saw that, and then I watched a couple weeks ago Joe Bagos's Bliss was kind of a hot topic this summer on the festival circuit, and Shudder picked it up. It's a movie about a young kind of a female artist whose career has reached an impasse. She can't finish her latest painting. She's dodging rent. She went from her career kind of escalating to suddenly nobody trusts her anymore. She's addicted to drugs. She's drinking too much. She's partying too much, and she has this creative block. And she becomes a sort of vampire. And the latest piece that she's been confused about what to do with for quite some time begins to take shape over the course of the film. It's a very psychedelic movie. It's one of those movies that warns you at the beginning that there are strobing effects, and I really thought I was going to have a seizure at multiple points. Damn. It's kind of like Only Lovers Left Alive, except it's an hour and a half. It moves much faster, and it's a hell of a lot druggier. And the last thing is, I finally caught up with The Lighthouse, which I was very impressed by. I'm going to go ahead and say it's a horror movie. I'm tired of this argument about any movie. As I've said before, horror is the only genre that's named for the feeling it produces in the consumer. The Lighthouse made me feel horrified at many points throughout for various reasons and in various ways.
Early and often.
Yeah, it is a singular piece of work. I can't wait to see what Robert Eggers does next, because he's so thoroughly impressed me with his 2 films so far. Yeah, happy to say I finally caught up with that one.
For those of you who don't know Robert Eggers just by name, The Witch.
Yes.
The fucking Witch. One of the fucking best movies, period, of the past decade.
And I want his third film to feature like an animal that we don't normally associate with being quite so sinister, like on the poster, because there was, for The Witch we had the Black Phillip poster, we had the seagull poster for The Lighthouse, and it looked like it was sort of orchestrated to match well with the Witch poster, and I just wonder what animal he's going to make me terrified of next.
I heard at one point, it's been a while, so I'm assuming it's not happening anymore, but he was supposed to do kind of an adaptation of Nosferatu based on the folklore, like the very Eastern European, or I guess it's Southern Eastern European folklore. And I was really interested in that, but I haven't heard anything else about it, which is kind of a bummer, because that would have been
still shopping it around.
Really?
It's fallen through a couple of times. There was a moment where it was confirmed that it was happening.
Yeah.
And then it took, a while, and then we finally got The Lighthouse instead, which I think was from an earlier script that he'd written with his brother a long time ago.
Yep.
But I think, A24 is going to let him do whatever the fuck he wants, which is evident in The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know who else would finance this crazy thing.
There's some wild shit in there.
I say, it was a hit. I say if he wants to make Nosferatu, they're going to let him do it.
I hope that happens, because I was really excited about that.
I haven't watched shit, so I'm glad that Steven's here, as usual, to fill us in with the backlog of everything you've been seeing. But I did find out that The Nightingale is on Hulu, I think.
Oh, yeah,
The
it is.
Nightingale?
And
What
so
is
I'm
that?
really looking forward to that. That's Jennifer Kent.
From the Babadook, remember?
Oh,
The Babadook
fuck.
director, yeah.
I'm not going to watch it.
No? Why not?
Because it is... I've heard descriptions of it. I know people who've seen it who were just pummeled and pulverized by it. I mean, this is a movie that I'm sure it gets its point across, but I don't know if I can stomach that.
Yeah, I've heard it's very intense.
Well, what the hell did we watch this week, guys?
Hey, we still got 2 more fucking chit-chat topics.
Okay.
Speaking of The Witch, let's check in with our resident witch, who's been watching Another Witch on Netflix.
Shock. I've been making my way through season 3 of Sabrina. It's I love Sabrina. It's not a perfect show. It's pretty campy.
It's not a perfect show. I watched the first season. I liked it a lot.
But it's enjoyable.
Yes.
It's really fun. Season 3, so far, and I'm pretty far into it. I was on episode 8 or 9 before I came over here, is great. It brings in pagans in this season, and I won't tell you what happens there, but it's very interesting and not what I would have expected, and it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of what the fuck moments. I don't know. Anyways, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I don't often binge stuff, these days. I don't have the time or energy to, but this is one of those shows that like I will keep binging as long as it feels worthy of
God bless Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
I really need to catch up. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things. It's the only barrier to me is this always pisses me off with any show. The first episode is like an hour and 12 minutes, and I'm like, that's not a TV episode, that's a movie, and it's more time commitment that I want. So it keeps like stopping me from starting.
I would argue that the pilot is actually the first 2 episodes. You really have to watch the first 2 episodes. The first episode ends in an arbitrary place, and then the second episode actually completes the arc and teases you for what's to come.
It is a really odd way to begin a show, and actually I did watch the first episode, the hour and 10 minute whatever it was, and just felt like very confused, and it's got really odd like pacing issues, and I thought like, maybe this gets better, I'm just going to table it for later, and it never happened.
It works itself out.
I mean, look, it's not a perfect show. No. It's not a if don't let us talk it up too much. You're going to be disappointed.
It's fun though. It's fun. Don't take it too seriously, and just like sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, I will. Well, my note for this week is I didn't really watch much horror, but I did have kind of an Amon relevant experience earlier today. I listened to an interview with our good friend Todd McFarlane, creator of Spawn, the first movie we ever reviewed for this show.
Oh, what's he up to?
On the Cartoonist Kayfabe podcast, which is a dope podcast you should listen to.
What?
Kayfabe. Kayfabe is a term from wrestling. Basically, it refers to sort of the fictional world that the wrestlers create. And if a wrestler like talks about real life or indicates that the fictional character they've created on stage is not real, it's referred to as breaking kayfabe. So it's like just maintaining your like fictional world. So the idea is like kind of they're pulling back the veil on what it's like to be a cartoonist and talking about the cartoonist.
But how do you spell
industry.
kayfabe, just to tie this up in a bow?
Yeah, Kayfabe.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah, great podcast if you're into comics or cartooning or any of that. Anyway, so they interviewed Todd McFarlane, which was like a holy grail for them. They've been doing this podcast for like a year or something, and they like came up in the 90s when like the Spawn comic was out and was like the biggest fucking shit imaginable. And Todd McFarlane, my God, I've read many interviews with this man and always knew he was like a live wire and an aggressive personality. But it is a fascinating interview. He is still just a total kook. He's simultaneously like very full of himself but sort of inspiring. Like he was just like talking about like how to like stick up for yourself and like pursue your dream basically. And I don't know, I was fascinated. It was a fascinating interview, and it's funny to catch the occasional hints of his self-awareness, but most importantly perhaps for this podcast, he's still talking about that fucking Spawn movie that he wants to get made.
Spawn Jaws movie.
He said that he has an Oscar nominated person. He kind of intimated that it was a director who he's talking to about, and he was like, if I talk to this person, it's getting made. Supposedly he has like Jeremy Renner and Jamie Foxx attached to it.
They've been in talks for a while, which is bizarre.
It's the Spawn movie without Spawn in it, right? That's the concept.
Spawn,
I think,
is like what he keeps saying is that like Spawn is like a presence that looms over the movie, and that he's in very little of it. So like Spawn like appears, I don't know, like up on the skyscraper in the background or something is what I imagine.
Such an odd
People
concept.
are talking about Spawn. They're dealing with the aftermath of things Spawn has done.
Yeah.
And they're looking for Spawn.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm curious.
It sounds lame, honestly.
It does sound lame.
But who knows? He has such a weird imagination. There's got to be something to it.
He does, yeah. So yeah, if you're one of those longtime hardcore Amon listeners, you heard episode 000 and you want to hear from the maniac behind Spawn, go listen to Cartoonist Kayfabe's interview with that crazy ass motherfucker.
Think I will.
Well, now that we've talked about shit for like fucking forever, I mean, it's good that we talked about other shit for fucking forever, because the movie we watched this week is short as hell.
I think we talked for longer than the duration of this movie.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
What did we watch this week, Steven? And I guess you didn't pick it.
I didn't pick it, but I got excited.
You got
audibly excited that the wheel picked it.
Ask the wheel. It should be able to tell us.
Yeah,
like,
can we use like Amazon Polly to do the wheel?
The wheel is like sitting over in the corner smoking a cigarette. It's like a gremlin now.
No, so we watched The Devil and Father Amorth, which is a William Friedkin documentary. I had heard about this I think it came out in like 2018,
17, something like that. Yeah.
17.
I remember
years
hearing
old.
about it on Shockwaves and reading stuff about it on the festival circuit and thinking like, oh, how cool. William Friedkin, who, probably needs no introduction, but he directed The Exorcist and also Cruising and Bug, two other kind of tangentially horror-related
And
movies.
The French Connection, let's not forget.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're talking horror,
Sorcerer.
like how he fits. Yeah, Sorcerer's a great movie. It's not horror. But a master filmmaker, obviously, with hugely important to the horror genre. And I thought, oh, he's making a movie about an exorcism, a documentary. How fucking perfect is that? This must be amazing.
And so it's weird to see a master filmmaker left to his own devices with a handy cam, basically just shooting his own movie and putting it together in iMovie or some shit.
Yeah.
And what you get.
So the story is Friedkin is assigned to do an article for Vanity Fair. There's a very famous priest, Father Amorth, who's
Exorcist.
A famous
Exorcist. I mean,
priest, but also
priest
exorcist.
/ exorcist.
Famous exorcist. He's done thousands of exorcisms.
Multi-talented.
He's basically the Vatican's answer to Jay.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that exorcist was like a job title you could
Yeah.
have.
I didn't know there's a statistic.
Like, I thought that was a pure figment of movies.
You didn't know
I
there
didn't
were
know that
real
I
exorcists?
didn't know that
didn't
the
know
Catholic
that?
Church like employs exorcists.
Oh
Yes.
my god, yeah.
Hell yeah.
My mind was
Wow.
But
Wow.
what blew my mind is there's a statistic early on in the film
Yeah.
that Friedkin delivers in a pretty, deadpan way, but it's like shocking. It's something like 50,000?
500,000 Italians
are exercised once a year.
once a year.
That was wild.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Friedkin is given this, of course, Vanity Fair is like, oh, we should have William Friedkin go interview an actual exorcist.
That wasn't
That's gold.
quite the background. He was put in. He heard about this case and he went over there and I think he met Father Amorth and then came back and was talking about his travels with a Vanity Fair editor who said, you should write that story. Go back and whatever. And so he did.
They sent him with a handy cam that we see a lot of in this movie. In fact, we see people filming him with the handy cam.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
We will.
But yeah, it turns out Father Amorth is about to perform a ninth exorcism
Ninth, yep.
on a woman named Christina. Of course, she's a woman. We'll get into that too. And that's essentially your movie.
That's a statement.
That's a statement. Should I get into the statement? Should I just...
I'm just curious what you mean by that, so I guess we might as well get into it.
I mean, I feel like it's a thing with exorcism stories, which you guys know I'm not a fan of, that it's like always a woman that's being tormented by the demon because she's perceived of as being like weak of spirit and body. And so she's an easier vessel for the demon to penetrate. And I'm like, okay, I get like this is like a big deal because it's like her ninth exorcism, but also like there was no attention drawn to that trope in exorcism stories, and it felt like kind of a missed opportunity for me to explore that.
I think it just it was just happened to be the exorcism that was available when Friedkin went over and said, hey, let me see an exorcism.
Right.
I mean, they do talk about how the exorcism that inspired the Exorcist book
Was a boy. Yep.
So obviously they're exorcising people of both genders. I don't know to what perception, but yeah, in the real world, it does raise some questions about maybe how are women treated versus men in these situations, and
well, when it's women, it's always sexualized. Like I think I mentioned this on the show a while ago. I read this great book called Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay that is like kind of a meta text about like exorcism and how it's portrayed in films. And when you think of exorcisms, I don't know about you, but I think of the classic image of like a woman tied down to a bed,
yes,
and writhing and screaming.
But let's separate.
Like in the first appearance of Jay.
Yeah.
But let's separate the tropes of the fictional exorcisms from what is going on in this movie.
Sure.
Yeah, because this movie is not fictional.
Well,
I say that with caution, but like it is a documentary first and
basically,
foremost.
William Friedkin is personally fascinated with the phenomenon of exorcism, in no small part because he gets royalties off of people being fascinated with exorcism. So he just is launching this investigation to see what it is and capture one on tape and see what it's about. I had assumed that William Friedkin was a devout Catholic, the way he approaches this subject matter. he's not. Apparently he's agnostic.
Yeah.
So he's just fascinated by the phenomenon.
He is fascinated. Like, I mean, you do have the feeling of, I mean, as cheesy as his like speeches directly to the camera are, and that's what's like it's so groan worthy. But like, you do get the sense like this is a passion project for him. Like he's like kind of a believer.
Yeah,
he wants to believe.
He wants to believe.
My favorite thing, one thing that I did like about his approach to it was, honestly, for most of it, I really couldn't tell what his take was on it. All I knew is that he was fascinated by it and wanted to know more. And I really liked that about it.
Yeah, I liked how sort of unpretentious he comes off on camera. Like, he's always just dressed in like the dorkiest old man clothes, and
his belt is always just kind of like askew.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, this feels like a very relatable, very human tour guide to this whole thing. I enjoyed his presence, at least in the early going.
It's like anyone's dad just picked up a camera and decided to, go down to the train depot and talk to people about the trains.
Yeah.
It happens to be an exorcism.
It's so fucking weird, though, that like this is a master filmmaker. Granted, he's made a lot of shit, too. I mean, it's probably about 50-50 with him. The master filmmaker making the first documentary of his career, and it does feel like my grandfather made a film. Having never seen a documentary before.
It feels like it is. And I think this is kind of a weirdly charming thing about it because it came out in 2017, but it feels like a documentary from the 80s or 90s. Like it's a little bit of like unsolved mystery.
Yes,
feel to it.
That was exactly what
I was
thinking.
gonna say Unsolved Mysteries is on Amazon Prime, and I've been watching old episodes.
I used to watch it all the time.
When I first started watching this, I thought two things almost right off the bat. William Friedkin reminds me of Donald Trump. His voice.
You remind me of a little John Voight talking about Donald Trump.
Oh, okay. and then I thought of, what is it, Robert Stack? Is that the name of the guy from Unsolved Mysteries? Yeah, I thought of that too.
Yeah.
And it just made me want to watch more Unsolved Mysteries.
It was just like the shots of like him in front of like a house on like a sidewalk, just like very deadpan, very dry, talking to the camera. That reminded me so much of it.
Very presentational.
Weird, though. Yes. It's so weird because like we get this little like there's a chunk of the movie that feels like it's pulled out of a behind the scenes documentary from The Exorcist, where he's like talking about how they had to like replace part of the front of the house and this is where the steps are.
Totally irrelevant to the subject matter.
Right.
So irrelevant. It's like he didn't entirely know what he was doing. Like he was just like filming stuff for funsies and then just pieced it together at the end.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
Or like he had, 15 to 20 minutes worth of actual exorcism footage and he needed something to pad out a running time, which this still has nothing close to like an actual traditional feature length running time. It's 69 minutes, but it's definitely like, oh, okay, you really need something to kind of like fill this movie out. And so he starts with talking about how he made The Exorcist, which I will say was very interesting. I was like, that was cool how
and
they
also,
built the false front on the building.
But it was also like so weird that he had like, we're gonna give you that, but we're going to give you like so little of it. It's like this incomplete picture. So I'm like, okay, I get it. If you don't know who William Friedkin is, I don't know why you're seeing this movie because the whole draw is it's William Friedkin who made The Exorcist. They can move on an exorcism, but okay, give a little context, I suppose.
I mean, so Allison watched this way before we even picked it. Like I had not even heard of this when we picked it. What drew you to it when you watched it the first time?
Because I've always been fascinated by demonology and exorcisms. I don't really believe in that stuff, but it is one of like the few things that genuinely kind of like scares me. I like, it's like, I don't really believe in this, but also like, I'm not gonna touch that or mess with that just in the off chance that for some reason it's real. Because that shit genuinely freaks me out. And while this documentary didn't freak me out, I've seen documentaries before about this stuff that have left me shaken.
Yeah.
That's
like
more than William
paranoid.
Friedkin can say.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah. So I was drawn to it in that sense because I am drawn to like the supernatural, and that is a particular corner of the supernatural that just tends to genuinely like leave me feeling very unsettled.
Yeah, I feel the same way about it, where like I don't believe in demons, but that shit still fucks with me because I don't know, and I'm afraid to like denounce it too much because then maybe a demon will come and fuck with me. And I felt a genuine sense of dread for. I mean, I felt a genuine sense of like I was really interested to watch this movie for that reason. I was like, a documentary about an actual exorcism?
Oh, me too.
And I felt a genuine sense of dread, like, building up to the exorcism, because he rather smartly starts the movie with a kind of out-of-context shot of Father Amorth, the exorcist, walking down a hallway, presumably into the room where he's going to do this exorcism.
It reminded me
and I kind of got chills, you know. I was like, oh, I'm spooked. What's going to happen?
I got chills because the first shot reminded me of the first shot of The Irishman.
Yes.
Because it's just like tracking him down the halls of like what looks like it could be a rest home or something.
We should probably talk about Father Amorth's personality a little bit, because he's an interesting guy. He's got a really great sense of humor for someone who's performed thousands of exorcisms. He begins every exorcism by thumbing his nose at the devil, making that was cute. That little turkey thing that kids do on their nose. And he seems like a pretty cheery guy, especially for 93 years old or however the fuck
especially
old he is.
For 93, and especially for somebody who just deals with demons all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's
that
like,
would get him down.
If I had a demon in me, that's the guy I'd want, because he ain't afraid of no ghost.
And there's people who talk about how he's a funny guy and how he has a sense of humor, and you see a little bit of it in this documentary. I wish you saw more of it. I read in the Vanity Fair article that Friedkin wrote that he liked to say, "Do you know why the devil is afraid of me? Because I'm uglier than he is."
It's kind of like grandpa humor, but it's
grandpa
cute.
humor.
It's cute and effective.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you just said about the lack of his personality, because I didn't get a lot of personality off him in this,
The
honestly.
problem with this documentary is that it seems like not only was it made by someone who's never made a documentary before, it seems like it was made by someone who's never watched a documentary before or has never watched Unsolved Mysteries before. There was no panache to this film.
To be fair, he had fairly limited access. Apparently, you know, I do want to table that for later, because there's one part of this movie that frustrated the fuck out of me. But it seemed like he had kind of limited access to like what he could actually like film and show in the finished
I know
film.
what part you're talking about, because it frustrated me too. Yeah,
I was very interested in the personalities of Father Amorth. I was very interested in William Friedkin, who really has a presence in this movie and is a very interesting narrator, and his whole demeanor when he's on screen. But like, I would rather have a third party making this documentary about
Agreed.
William Friedkin's investigation.
Agreed.
I want to see what William Friedkin says about this shit when he's like in the car driving, not when he's like just standing in front of the church or whatever.
He would never let it happen, though.
And you would need, you know, or have someone edit it who like just doesn't have William Friedkin's interest in like, these steps are important to this faith because they were built in 1298.
That was a weird part. I was like, this has nothing to do with anything.
It felt like...
Well, Father Amorth worked there for a while, but it was still kind of irrelevant.
The steps from going up to Pontius Pilate's house were taken
He also
to
calls
this
him
place.
Pontius Pilate, which I thought was odd.
Oh.
Does anybody really pronounce it that way?
Not that I know of, but who's to say we're pronouncing it right either?
I don't know. My priest could have been wrong. I was raised Catholic. I mean, I always heard Pontius Pilate.
I didn't know you were raised Catholic. That's fascinating. So does that give demons
I'm not going to have any interesting insight for you. Like, the fact that I was raised Catholic ends at that statement.
Okay.
I don't think it's influenced me in one way or the other.
Well, here's why I ask, because I think The Exorcist is a decent horror movie. It doesn't really turn the dial for me, but I've heard that a lot of people, especially Catholics, are fucking terrified of The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a kid, I was terrified at the idea of it. I'd seen little bits of it at my friend Jeremy's house once and just like, oh, no, I can't do that. But I, like, never believed, even when I was young, unless I really wanted something. Like, the only time I ever prayed is if I, like, felt guilty about something or I wanted something. So, like, I never... and I still don't really understand the possession genre because I don't see what's at stake. Like, there aren't any fucking demons that can inhabit you.
Eternal soul.
Right. And I get why, like, if you're a believer or you have been, or you're, like, on the fence or you're, like, curious about that aspect of spirituality, how that could be scary. But for me, it just doesn't do anything.
For me, the scary thing is lack of control. It's something that you can't see, kind of like a parasite taking you over, controlling your actions and not having any sense of self-control.
Well, yeah, and then you forget about the fictional or the mythological concept of demon possession. You know, whatever this woman who we see in this documentary is going through, it seems like she's out of control.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, whatever medical, psychological, supernatural reason, she's out of control. And, you know, maybe not getting the treatment that she actually needs.
Yeah.
Being held in chairs by people and stuff.
She is distressed.
I think there's could be a gendered interpretation of that, to Steve's point. And it's like, yeah, you know, this is kind of fucked up, whether or not there's a demon involved.
Can we talk about the actual exorcism yet?
Yeah. I mean, so that's what you gotta understand. This movie is maybe I don't know, 15-20 minutes of kind of a prelude where Friedkin's talking about The Exorcist, the movie, and his interest in the subject matter, and getting together with this priest, and a very long series of interviews with some other Italian couple that was exercised in the past, which is very dry.
Well, one of them works with Amorth now, right?
Yeah.
Part of the significance of that.
And he can recognize.
But it's like unusually dry. You're right, because the guy who works with Amorth is just like unfazed by anything.
Yeah, and he is telling a story that is kind of weird and could be moving or creepy if, like, the person was showing any emotion while telling it. And it's just this long take of him telling this story. And usually, if you devote that much time to a single, like, talking head interview, like, you're getting some wild shit out of whatever that person is giving you. But it doesn't gel in this instance.
And then the meat of this movie, of course, is the film of the actual exorcism, which is 20 or 30 minutes, and you just have to watch it straight through.
Yeah.
I don't think
cuts.
it's not 30 minutes.
I mean, it's not 30 minutes.
I think it's 20 minutes.
20
I think I
minutes.
timed it.
20 minutes. I mean, forget about 1917. You want to see a long take? Watch this.
And it's the filming of the actual exorcism itself is fascinating, because I mean, I'm sure that there were like cuts and stuff like that in the filming, but
I don't
there was
think
also
so.
No, there's cuts.
Are there?
It definitely cuts a few times.
Yeah, because an exorcism takes longer than 20 minutes typically. And I've watched exorcism footage before, and it was pretty standard.
Do they usually feature sound effects like those in this one?
So, I
mean
wanted
just
to
like
talk
her, like,
about that.
like
Yeah,
that?
like what the? Why would he do that?
No, that's the sounds that people make.
There is.
Wait, why
Yes,
would-
I know what Steve's trying to say. It sounded like in some of her demonic
doesn't sound
outbursts,
real.
it sounded like there was a filter put on it after the fact.
Yes.
And it seems obviously manipulated. And I guess the only rationale for it, I don't think he's trying to bullshit us, but I guess maybe he heard something in that room that didn't come on the tape, because it was all actually, he only heard it because of the power of suggestion.
Oh my god, it's so fucked up.
So he was trying to present the subjective experience of being in the room rather than what he was actually purporting to do with his camera. I don't know.
Which the whole idea is to show us the naked truth of this moment.
Right.
I believe that her voice sounded like that. I thought that was her voice.
Actually was a thing, because I mean, let's look at this documentary. It's not very high tech. So why would he take all of that time to manipulate the audio of just her? I don't know. I don't think, and I've, as somebody who's also watched other exorcism footage, audio, stuff like that, that's supposed to be, quote, real, like the sounds that she's making, though they sound completely insane and completely unreal, are pretty common with that kind of stuff.
It was distinctly like a digital effect sounding thing, though. Like it's like impossible for the human voice to sound like that. It almost sounds like it's on like another audio track. Like it's isolated from everything else when she's screaming.
I felt the same way. It felt manipulated to me. I'm not an expert. Who knows? Maybe it was in the original footage. It did strike me as having been manipulated.
It does sound like it, but
I mean, it sounds unnatural for sure.
And
but I thought I think it's for real.
The quality of the rest of the recording.
I mean, it's certainly the only supernatural element of this scene.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
It is. So it's like this, in my opinion, the footage lives or dies by like how you handle that sound. Because otherwise, I don't think it's terribly interesting.
well, yeah,
It doesn't live or
exorcism
die-
itself is fairly mundane. I mean, it's a lot of praying and a lot of like the person being half passed out and a bunch of people praying over them, and every once in a while they scream and they writhe and they speak in potentially other languages.
And then they come back to normal, and then they start to freak out again.
Yeah,
and then everybody's got to
I mean, that's how it goes typically. It's not like it is in the movies.
Yeah, like I said, I had this great sense of dread about watching this scene, and then when it got to it, I was kind of like, oh, this is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally just like her sitting there and writhing and being held back and growling
and saying like really ridiculous things like I'm in league with Satan, or we are Legion.
I am Satan, I think.
We are Legion.
Yeah.
And subtitled, so
Yeah.
unless you speak Italian and Latin, who knows? I don't know. I was interested at first, and then I started to get bored as hell. And I would recommend to anyone watching this movie, unless you're super interested in the blow by blow, just fast forward through this after about 5 minutes. It's all the same.
Yeah,
Really? Huh.
Yeah, that's my take.
I would say the same thing.
I thought everything around this footage was much more interesting than the actual exorcism footage.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to show what an actual exorcism looks like, and it's kind of fascinating to see that from the person who created The Exorcist. So our modern concept, our like concept as a society of what an exorcism looks like, he created basically, and then he is also now showing what an exorcism typically really looks like, which is kind of boring.
It's like if
Pretty low
Steven
key.
Spielberg took his camcorder to the aquarium. Sharks swimming around.
Yeah.
It's like if James Cameron made a movie about deep sea diving.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in a way, I was actually fascinated by the mundaneness of this scene. Like, it was really interesting to me just seeing all these, like, old Catholic people standing around the room, like her family and friends, I guess, just muttering prayers and being, like, totally unsurprised by anything that was going on. Like, no one, I just started watching people's faces to see if anyone just, like, even flinched or looked up suddenly when she would, like, start roaring or whatever. Nothing. Like, everybody's just, like, stone faced practically.
It was like any other ritual. It's like watching a confirmation or a communion or something. They're just all sitting around praying, and the whole family's there. There's got to be 30 people in this room,
right?
Yeah.
And which leads me to wonder too if like there isn't an element of these exorcisms that isn't performative. You know, where like it's like, oh, my whole family's worried about my legitimate mental illness, but we're religious, so they think I'm possessed. And if everybody's watching me, I better put on a show.
I mean, that's a very, very common belief, especially amongst non-believers, of course, is that these are people who need help and who are trying to seek attention and care, and the only time they're getting it from their family and the people around them is when they, you know, are like, oh, it's the devil, and they go through this, and it's supposed to be a very cathartic experience, supposedly, for these people to just be able to fucking writhe and yell profanities and like threaten people.
I mean, that sounds great to me.
I mean, I can see the appeal.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, man, get a bunch of people in a room around me where I just get to like fucking act like I'm just absolutely off my rocker and not myself, and
they're not going to judge you for it
through some stuff. You know, it's kind of like a form of therapy.
And it's there's a mass. I mean, obviously I don't really believe in the actual literal demonic possession here. I wish I did. I'm fascinated by the concept, but I don't think it's real. Sorry, but
who are you apologizing to?
Myself, I guess. But you know, just having that many people, it's like a mass delusion sort of thing. It's like the power of suggestion has to be so strong, especially if you have some sort of compromised mental state anyway, where it's like, yes, the devil's inside you. 30 people are just chanting at you about how the devil's inside you. It's like when a stage magician like hypnotizes somebody, you know.
And it's cool because the documentary does touch on where this phenomenon may come from, and the power of belief and the power of what you've been raised to believe, and that's how people will deal with things in the way that they know how to. And it does talk about that, and it does talk about how like clearly these people are going through something, you know, but maybe they're possessed because that's what they know and that's what people around them are telling them.
And I mean, like, this woman, there are only a couple of brief interview shots with her. She looks haunted.
Yes,
like,
she does.
when she's just speaking to the camera under normal circumstances, not during the exorcism, I'm just like, oh boy.
She's going through some shit.
You have seen some shit, you know?
I wanted to see her climb up the wall.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
So after the exorcism, William Friedkin returns to the States and embarks and documents a little bit of an investigation into, medical and religious explanations for what's going on. And I thought that was a little more interesting. But when we before we get into all that though, why don't we review it, and then we'll go down to the spoiler room and we'll talk about the results of that investigation, and maybe a little follow-up situation he had with the possessee.
The Possessee. I love it. I want to write a movie called The Possessee. Who wants to go first?
Fuck it, I'll go first. Screw it. I think you probably could have figured that out from the beginning. I mean, this movie, it's like, I don't know, it's a little sad to me, honestly. Friedkin's a really brilliant guy. I've listened to a ton of interviews with him over the years, and this just isn't a good look for him. This feels like this would have been better served as, I think Chris nailed it, if there had been a third party, that could separate Friedkin from like the vision of the documentary, it would have worked better. As it stands, it feels like a Blu-ray special feature. And it's got about the same quality. It feels like a Blu-ray special feature made by like a young amateur, like 22, 23-year-old horror fan, trying to make a mark or something. It didn't freak me out. I found it. I'm standing by it. We can argue to the death, but the vocal manipulation during the possession scene, finally was like the final nail in the coffin on this thing for me, where I realized, even the tiny moment of this that is supposed to look like the naked truth, it rings completely false, or it feels like it's not interesting enough to scare you, so he had to add another layer to it to try and trick you. It's bullshit.
Disagree. It's a hung jury, though.
It's bullshit. Yeah. This is my time to review it. It's my time to review it.
No official verdict on the vocal manipulation.
I just told you where I stand, and I will find confirmation of that online somewhere.
Yes, get back to it.
This show's not about being right or wrong, but I'll be right about this. You just wait.
All right, I'll go next because I want to ride on those coattails a little bit. I'm going to say screw it as well for most of the same reasons Steven mentioned. It's not to say it's not an uninteresting documentary. I thought the parts around the exorcism footage were at least somewhat interesting. I thought what Friedkin was trying to do was interesting. Again, I was compelled by Friedkin's personal stake in this question, but I don't think it works as a documentary. I don't think it works really as exorcism footage, and it kind of just made me wish I were watching The Exorcist. So maybe that was the intent. I don't know. So I say screw it. But I wouldn't discourage if you hear what we have to say, and I wouldn't discourage someone from seeing it if they're especially interested in exorcisms, or if they're Catholic and especially interested in the question and especially creeped out by exorcism stories. So screw it though for me. Patrick,
I want to defer to Allison, the guest of honor.
Allison.
Oh, wow.
Would you view it?
Feels so special.
Would you screw it?
I would cue this movie. Just documentary. I'm a big fan of documentaries. I like to watch a lot of documentaries. I thought it was an interesting subject matter, and I appreciated the lack of, for the most part, the lack of sensationalization of this. I really appreciated that, because I think especially things like, the supernatural and exorcisms in particular, that hits a pretty rough place for some people. And this was just kind of it was what we talked about, the sort of mundanity of exorcism, and I liked that it brought in explanations, and nobody seemed to be too emotionally attached to any of the explanations, and I really appreciated that. Because a lot of times, especially with stuff like this, and especially when you get documentaries, they try to bring in this creepy spin to it, and it makes it cheesy and kind of unbearable. And it was dry, but, interesting enough. So if you like documentaries, if you like the supernatural, if you're intrigued by this stuff, I would say, if you're bored and at home and, make a, I don't know, bowl of popcorn and sit back and watch this while you casually, browse through your phone.
That is the definition of a Q-it. I think you nailed it.
Does it require
Well
does it require an extra screen for you to get through? It's a Q-it. I'm gonna go Q-it as well. I don't know. It feels like a weirdly milquetoast rating because I feel like I need to make a more like direct judgment on this film because it does do some weird and sort of questionable things, and it's objectively not a good film. You know. But it's so fascinating to me that this, you know, acclaimed director who made some of the most iconic movies of all time just created this weird and sort of amateurish little passion project, and did actually get like a unique level of access to, you know, an exorcism conducted by the Vatican's head exorcist. Like that's cool. You know, you don't see that every day. And it's just the oddity of it, the novelty of it was sort of fascinating to me, even if it did kind of start to tax my attention span in its very short running time. So having damned it with that faint praise, I will remind you all before we go to the spoiler room to go to everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com, click on the merch store link, and buy our shit. And also go like and follow and share us and subscribe on all the social media and podcast providers. AmonCast, EHMONcast is where you find us.
Allison, it seems like you're familiar with watching Exorcist videos. Like,
Yeah.
Have you seen videos of real life exorcisms before?
Yeah.
So this movie isn't unique. This isn't the first time someone's videoed an exorcism.
No.
No, but I'm talking about like specifically that this guy is like the top shit exorcist, and that it was apparently like sort of a big deal. And we didn't mention, you know, he laid out these kind of specific conditions for Friedkin, that Friedkin could be the only one in the room and that he had to have a single camera and no lighting, no crew.
He said, great, I don't have lighting or crew anyway.
That's convenient.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Friedkin being there really brings to this exorcism. I would rather just watch like real exorcisms on YouTube without any of the commentary surrounding them.
I'll bet there's much scarier ones
probably
than the exorcism depicted in this.
That's what I was thinking. Without editing, without, you know, like, I was thinking of like how Dateline even would frame this. You know, they would just cut to the important parts of the exorcism, and if you want, you can go on YouTube and watch the 2-hour ordeal or whatever.
I mean, that's the thing, though. It is edited. Like, I mean, and I see
It's
what
not
you're
edited
saying.
well, but
I see,
it's edited.
I see what you're saying. Like, it is really long and should be edited for more punch. But there are cuts, you know, and I'm just sort of, I'm actually kind of curious about what was left out. You know, what's the more boring version of this exorcism?
Yeah, because it feels like you'd be better off, if you're interested in this, to just go on YouTube and look up exorcism footage.
Yeah, and just watch whatever has the most views, because it's probably actually unsettling.
Or I would recommend, if you want to see someone at the top of his game going face to face with a real monster for 9 hours, look up the Ontario Provincial Police interrogator Jim Smith interviewing Colonel Russell Williams, a serial killer.
I was trying to remember that guy's name the other day. I'm glad you brought it up.
I think this is the second reference you've made to this in Amon history.
I'm still obsessed. Yeah, Colonel Jim Smith of the Ontario Provincial Police, master interrogator. You can look him up on YouTube, find him interrogating all kinds of heinous killers, most notably Colonel Williams, is that what I said? Who
I thought it was Russell something. It doesn't matter.
Are we in the spoiler room yet?
Russell Williams.
We need to get down there.
Russell Williams, who was killing women on a military base. Fascinating. That is
great shit. That's great drama.
That is like a 4-hour video that you just don't want to look away from.
Oh, I didn't watch all 4 hours. But
well, it does become a little routine after he breaks them, but
yeah, it's a view it with prejudice.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go down the creepy old stairs to the spoiler room, and we'll We'll tell you what Friedkin found out. Are exorcisms real? Are demons real? Are you possessed right now? We'll tell you in a moment. Welcome back. We're down here in the spoiler room, ready to exorcise the shit out of this movie.
We got a camera set up on a tripod. We got Allison tied down to a bed. About to get real.
Different scenario.
So yeah, let's get into it. So William Friedkin, after Christina is apparently safe, but she's not safe because we see in the footage that like while they're all like, all right, he's like cleaning up, she like snaps back into demon mode right at the end of that session, and they're like, all right, well we'll have to schedule you to come back next week. I'm wondering to what extent is this like a financial racket for the church. I gotta imagine it costs money to get exercised. And you're getting exercised.
I don't know about that.
I mean, you're getting exercised 9 times, or at least you have to put some money in the hat, you know?
My understanding from what I've known about exorcisms and exorcists in the past is that they cannot be paid for those services.
But don't they pass around a little hat for the church, for the collection?
Maybe, but the exorcist cannot be paid for that service.
Okay, well,
I feel like that would be pretty blatantly cheesy for the Catholic Church to be like, oh, exorcism? that'll be, $1,000.
I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean, I'm just going based on the tradition of like how you used to have to pay the church money to get your parents out of purgatory after they died or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
So and just the fact that they have to, and just that they have to do these sessions so often, I'm like, this is a lot of time for there's got to be an upside for the church. The 500,000 people going to see an exorcist once a year and they haven't found a way to monetize it.
Italy must be wild.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, the question in general is, of course, how much this whole thing is just a fucking racket.
But Friedkin, so after he gets his footage, he comes back to the America and he goes to University of California, Los Angeles Medical Center to talk to the top neurologists in the world, and apparently shows them, his 10-minute video, and it's like, well, do you think she's possessed or what? And so we're treated to these little, for me, the most interesting part of the movie, where you have these medical doctors interpreting what they've been seeing. Long story short, none of them exclude the possibility that there could be a demonic possession going on.
Or that
but he's
the
clearly
ritual of exorcism is helping her work something out.
They don't want to like discredit the spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's
they don't want to
clearly
offend anyone.
And he's clearly selected for doctors. Like, he's not going to show you the doctor who's like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, that's not what he's trying to do with the movie.
I believe that this doctor has worked on Friedkin before. That was my thought while I was watching. I was like, they have a personal relationship.
He says he's like there's clearly something wrong with her, and she needs help, and maybe this is one way she can deal with that.
Yeah.
But
but he doesn't go as far to say like exorcism as a form of removing demons from your soul is a
valid
thing.
pursuit.
Yeah.
I thought this stuff was all kind of lame because we really don't get much insight from any of these people.
So this passage was primarily fascinating to me because it just featured some of the most hilariously amateurish filmmaking choices in the entire movie. So we've established that Amorth wanted Friedkin to only use this single camera during the exorcism, but for some reason we carry this convention over into these scenes. Sort of. We repeatedly see Friedkin filming with his little handheld digital camera, but obviously there's also someone filming him, and unclear why we need to have him with his shitty digital camera filming these doctors, which then those shots look terrible because they're not really composed at all, and frequently the doctors are out of focus, or they like extend their hands toward the camera and throw off the focus, and the whole thing just looks bad.
And Friedkin looks like he's it looks like he's just heard about this guy Errol Morris and his Interatron. Because he's doing the interview looking at the viewfinder on the camera, and he looks so serious. Like
he's
he knows
like
exactly what he's
like
doing.
the guy in American Beauty who's like taking videos of everything.
Yeah,
it's just it made me actually a little bit sad. It was kind of embarrassing.
It was a little embarrassing.
I would love to go to LA and just free of charge follow William Friedkin around and take whatever video he wanted of whatever weird exorcism things.
But
for a day. No more.
But again, we say it's sad and embarrassing, and I agree, but also again, this is sort of part of the charm for me. I'm watching, again, one of the a pretty renowned director who's made like at least 2 of the most iconic fucking movies in American cinema, just sort of like bullshitting his way through making this documentary. It's fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating. But then he seems to take a little too much delight in the fact that these doctors are not willing to recommend neurosurgery to this patient based on a 10-minute video clip.
Yeah, that's the thing for me is like their stance is clearly we don't have enough information. You've shown us this video with embarrassing audio treatment on the subject's voice, and I don't know what I'm looking at here. I don't know what I'm looking at.
I am not about to recommend surgery.
This is going to be like a drop dead Fred
this is
scenario.
A Team Fred, Team Sanity thing here.
Yeah.
I'm
proud to be Team Insanity. I think she is insane. I think that voice is inhuman. Team Insanity.
All right, Team. I don't want to say Team Sanity because she needs help. I mean, this woman is not well.
No, not at all. And it's interesting because like
Your team doesn't even have a name.
One of the little interviews with her, they're like, "Have you like thought about going to therapy?" And she's like, straight up, she's like, "No, it's not going to help me. My distress is spiritual."
Because the fucking Catholic patriarchy has told her that.
Oh, absolutely. It's ridiculous, but it's sad, and it's also interesting because like they're like genuinely like, "Well, have you thought about this other potentially helpful thing?" And she's like, "No."
It is sad. I want the guy who did the Going Clear documentary in Scientology to make, I'm serious about this, somebody who's like that inquisitive and that level of talent to make a movie about the exorcism racket. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff psychologically and culturally to be mined from that. This movie is not the place for it.
What if you're almost right, Stephen? What if 1 out of every 2,000 exorcisms they perform is real?
I do want to live in that world. And to be perfectly honest,
I don't.
And if you start going around the Vatican sniffing into this racket, they're just going to open the lamp and push them onto you, and you're going to be damned.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really fast... I want to believe that there's some supernatural horror that really exists.
This will be Stigmata too.
If that's the price I have to pay...
They carry a glass bottle in their doctor's bag for people who ask too many questions, and it has like a real demon in it. And they smash it at your feet if you start asking too many questions. And then you start speaking in tongues and climbing up the walls.
Love it. I mean, I won't have any control. I won't even be myself. I won't even know what's going on. So
just another typical Saturday night for you.
Yeah, no consequences as far as I can see.
Anyway.
Yeah, I've called this a racket, but I also hesitate to say that because then I'm like, fuck, the demons are going to come for me now.
Yeah, it's like demons do listen to this podcast.
It's like
they're far more likely to listen to it than devout Catholics. Let's put it that way.
It's like the people who come around to your house after a hailstorm and try to get you to make insurance claims on shit. It's like, 1 out of every 100 houses was damaged by hail. It doesn't mean it's not a racket, but it doesn't mean there wasn't a hailstorm.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't need to get your Phaeton levels checked out.
It's like, there's the olive oil racket in Italy. It's not to say there's no authentic olive oil coming out of Italy. Of course there is. It's just the bottles are counterfeit.
This is the first I've heard of the olive oil racket.
Oh, you're probably cooking with horse shit over there.
Literal horse shit.
Well, read a book.
Where have I been instead of reading up on the fucking olive oil racket?
Yeah, look it up.
Gonna go home and rethink my life.
Olive oil counterfeit. Anyway, so from the hospital, and then he's left. He sees a journal article or something that talks about the phenomenon of demonic possession around the world, and I think attempts to come up with a psychological analysis of it. But his takeaway is, I did not know that demonic possession is a recognized phenomenon around the world.
This is okay. I thought of the nightmare in that moment. I was like, that like the nightmare didn't have anything more to say about sleep paralysis than this movie does demonic possession. Yes. Very similar takeaway.
But like the fact that doctors have like studied it does not mean that it's like, he seemed to take away that's like a real, the way he said that sounded like he was trying to stress that it's a real thing.
Oh, that demons are really possessing people and not that like people just believe that they're being possessed and therefore are exhibiting these symptoms.
Maybe that wasn't his intention. Maybe that's just how I read it into what he said.
That's how I took it though. He's like, well, if people are studying it, it must be real.
Oh, I did not read it like that at all.
Really?
Yeah, there was a certain credulity to the way that he handled all of this that was like oddly charming.
Yeah.
I was like, you're just buying whatever everybody tells you, and I kind of love it. It's just like your dear old grandpa, like, making a documentary.
And maybe I was just projecting my own like thoughts onto it, but yeah, I didn't get that he like really like that he was like, oh, this means that demon possession is a real thing. I got that. He's like, oh, this is a phenomenon that has occurred around the world and is recognized. And people have recognized this as a thing. That doesn't inherently mean it is actual demons. That means that people believe that there are demons and therefore, you know, exhibit these symptoms. And there, because this one thing, and I don't think we've touched on this enough, and this, because this was stressed a lot in this, is that belief creates the reality for these people. And that's a really important thing to talk about, because I liked that they talked about that, because that is absolutely what I think personally the phenomena is that people, you know, live with this dogma and live in this world where they're told that. So therefore, if something starts to go wrong with them, or they're not their best selves, they're like, I am clearly possessed. And then that just builds on itself. And it does talk about that quite a bit. And I appreciate that about this documentary.
That's a very good point, Allison.
I was fascinated.
Something I wish they'd explored a little more, though.
Agreed.
I was fascinated by his interview with the archdeacon or whatever of Los Angeles.
Oh my God.
Great.
That was so funny.
That was probably my favorite part of the movie.
You know, honestly, same. Yeah.
I mean, talking about belief, like this guy, you know, Friedkin kept pushing him, like, would you perform an exorcism? And the guy is basically just like, nope, not fucking with that shit.
Well, he also says,
Friedkin's like, well, does that mean you're not holy? And the guy's like, I mean, I'm okay, but I'm not good enough. You know?
He's like, oh, to do exorcisms, you have to be really, really holy.
Very spiritually sound.
This was another guy who, like, I mean, is in such a significant position of leadership, but came off like sort of spooked,
a little
spooked, and a
little irreverent, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and not, I guess, as professional as I would have expected. Like, I would have expected him to have some more gravitas and be more evasive, I guess, about the questioning. But he was pretty much like, exorcisms, fuck no, I'm not close to Catholic enough for that shit.
It's interesting because I think, like, in Italy, exorcisms are very commonplace and they're accepted as part of the institution. But I imagine if, like, a Roman Catholic in Italy believes in exorcisms, then a Roman Catholic in America also does, but we don't have that like framework. We don't have that sort of like infrastructure for dealing with exorcisms here the same way they do over there. So I like totally bought that he believes that shit is real and I ain't going anywhere near it. I'm not trained. I don't have the skills. I didn't go to exorcism school. Yeah. Fuck that.
Fascinating conversation.
Something interesting I saw in, I think it was the Vanity Fair piece, was Friedkin saying that he's never considered The Exorcist a horror movie.
What does he consider it?
He didn't set out to make one. He was just trying to make a movie about the power of religious experience or something like that.
Well, William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book, I mean, he is a true believer.
Yes.
And there are actually a couple of short interviews with him in this that I just like totally forgot about.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, Friedkin must have bought it, too. I don't know.
Also interviews with that weird guy who's not really introduced, but seems to have written a bunch of books about demons and shit.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about him, too.
That guy was...
He belongs on Ancient Aliens or something.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
He was disturbed.
Yeah.
He was truly haunted.
Yeah.
But then we get to the red meat. We get to the climax of the film.
Oh boy.
And can I tell you, this pissed me off.
It's just, file under extraordinary claims, require extraordinary evidence, or maybe just some evidence.
Any evidence. Something.
Evidence. And it's unclear whether this happened on the same trip to Italy or not. It's put at the end of the movie, probably for dramatic effect.
I read this as... I think he does say this, that like before he leaves, he goes for one last meeting with Christina and her husband, right?
Her boyfriend.
Whatever.
Although the Vanity Fair article reveals that it was her boyfriend, and also her mother, or maybe the boyfriend's mother. But like, there was
we don't hear about it.
Yeah, so his story is a little inconsistent.
There's no
here.
fourth man in this this scenario.
Yeah.
So they go to a church, right?
They're gonna meet in some church in some idyllic part of Italy, like where they walk in the Godfather with
It's
the
like
shotguns.
a mile climb or something to get up there.
Well, because they're
on the
supposed
ziggurat.
because they're supposed to meet her in Rome.
No.
Where does most of the movie take place? Because she changes location at the last minute. That's part of the weirdness of
Yeah,
the story.
they're
Is they
like-
have to drive like 3 hours out of their way to meet her.
They're like 2 or 3 hours outside of Rome in this idyllic village, and they go to this one park outside.
Yeah,
this
they were going to a
church,
park.
and it's 120 degrees in the shade.
Mm-hmm.
And then she doesn't show up, so they call her, and she's like, "Well, I'm at the other church where we
She's-
said we were going to
Yeah,
meet."
that's
very
right.
upset.
And so they go across town. I think it's the same town. They go across town to this other church.
I mean, like,
and-
we should mention, like, this is all relayed by Friedkin
Yeah.
in voiceover. Like, none of this is seen or depicted.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
just seeing
Happening.
like stock photos and aerial footage of the ziggurat of this town and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
And Friedkin's like, would you believe it? I just didn't have my camera on me this time.
No, I think he said that he wasn't allowed to have the camera in the church.
or that it would be like inappropriate. to me.
Yeah.
I read it the way Chris did, though. Like, yeah,
I mean, that's
shucks,
probably the
and
case.
even though he can't seem to separate the thing from his fucking hand in the rest of the movie.
Right. And so he proceeds to describe William Friedkin's The Exorcist taking place inside this church. Where Christina's crawling on the floor. The chairs are spinning. She's using the voice of legions of devils to demand the footage back or something.
I mean, I wish I could say that this was a massive exaggeration, but it's only a minor exaggeration of what he describes.
And the visuals accompanying this are like fast zoom in, zoom out, sound like statues in the church,
Oh,
and
it's
the
like
camera's like
History Channel,
rushing
like
up the
like haunted house shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Yes.
color corrected to look green as fuck.
Yeah.
It is so.
It's wild. And they're
corny.
like, her boyfriend like pins him down and like says, if you don't give us that footage, we'll kill you.
All right.
And-
So, great context from the Vanity Fair article where he relates the same story with some minor variations. And he quotes the boyfriend saying, "If you don't give it back to us," meaning the footage, "we will kill you. Satan will kill you. We will find your family, and we will kill you all." And Friedkin says he replies, he looked directly at the mother and the boyfriend and says, "I'm not going to bullshit you. I'll never give you the video."
wow. Action
He'll bullshit
hero.
the rest of us.
And then he says to his friend, "Let's go. We're done here."
Yeah. Oh my god, it's so ridiculous because like
Incredible.
none of this happened. There's no doubt
and
in my
there
mind.
was no need to put that in there. You know, I had enough respect, you know, that he put together this documentary that may have not totally like been great, but also felt honest and authentic in what he was trying to do. And then he adds this little sprinkling in towards the end for sensationalism, and it was just, it felt really cheap. And I was like, I don't buy any of this right now, dude.
I wonder if this is the part of the movie that Mark Kermode
I
wrote.
was just gonna bring that up.
The famous. I mean, well, I'm not famous. He's not famous,
Famous
but
to nerds like us.
yeah, I mean, prominent British film critic, and I mean a brilliant thinker, brilliant film writer. Mark Kermode, I guess, is a big fan of Friedkin and sought him out to help him write this movie, which is fascinating because the writing is not great. I wonder what Mark Kermode would have said about this movie had he reviewed it
right.
under
This is the
normal
kind of thing that
circumstances,
he would
because
just
he's
tear
pretty
apart.
scathing. Yeah.
I have to wonder if that was it. Friedkin's like, I don't have an ending for my movie. Write
Yeah,
something.
write
I
me
mean,
some
that makes
shit.
the most sense.
Well, a
It
lot of
does.
this, for what it's worth, a lot of the movie and a lot of the narration by Friedkin is verbatim from his Vanity Fair article, which is credited only to William Friedkin. But yeah, so you read the Vanity Fair article and it's like word for word. It talks about the Etruscan wall that was put together without mortar, like a jigsaw puzzle, and everything that he mentions. I don't know, but yeah, and that's it. And then we have a little few more shots with him talking to the creepy
And then we find out that Father Amorth died.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he
And
died.
That was sad, but he was 91, lived a good life.
But yeah, I wish
Pouring
he had
out.
more access to Father Amorth because we hear about him, and then there's the shot of him like getting on the elevator, which is kind of poignant.
It was cute.
And
It was a
it's
cute
like-
old man moment.
And William Friedkin's like, Father Amorth enriched my life.
Yeah.
It's like,
And changed me forever.
And that's the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the shot of the elevator seemed weird to me too because it was I guess it worked for some of y'all, but for me, Father Amorth did not respond and didn't say anything and just kind of like smiled get away from me, weirdo,
Right,
and
yeah.
like pushed the button, and that was it. It didn't do much for me. I was like, why am I watching this right now?
I would have loved like a feature-length documentary about Father Amorth that
Yes.
didn't have any of these other trappings. I want to
Yes.
see.
Yeah.
I want to live in Father Amorth's world for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah.
hear more about his life.
yes.
Yeah.
And his other experiences, how he became an exorcist, more of that.
Well, yeah, because they said he fought in World War II, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I want to see the documentary about, or the biopic of Father Amorth in World War II exercising
hell
on the
yeah.
battlefield.
I want
played-
Jonathan
Absolutely.
Price to play Father Amorth.
Because
Hell yeah.
the Nazis, as they were taking over churches and shit, were unleashing demons to create demon soldiers
Yeah.
to fight the Allies.
Yeah.
People don't know
Actually
about this part
true.
of history. I saw it on History Channel. But Father Amorth and his exorcist battalion would follow up the front line and vanquish all he'd exercise because they were possessing American servicemen.
I mean, really, the new Hellboy movie just needed some fucking Father Amorth in it.
Yeah. Well, good old Father Amorth. May he rest in peace. He seemed like a nice man.
Good
Yeah.
guy. Good guy.
So, what are we watching next week, Chris?
Are we done? Do we have anything else to say about the father and
I always
No.
jump the gun on this,
the
but
I don't think
Amorth
so.
and
I don't have
Father
anything
double?
else to say.
Sweet. What are we watching next week, Chris?
Well, it's my turn to pick, isn't it?
Or in 2 weeks from now?
Well, with a heavy heart, we're gonna watch Polaroid.
I actually really want to see that.
I
Wait,
think
why do you
it's-
say with a heavy heart?
Well, I don't know. It's just I don't know. Felt like a good thing to say.
Okay.
It just came out. I think.
All
Or it
right.
came out recently, and it's like
Is it end
Did
film?
did that get a theatrical release?
I don't know.
I think because that's from the guy who did the Child's Play remake, right?
Is it? I don't know.
I'm
you
pretty
seem
sure.
to know more than I do.
I'm pretty sure, and I think it got buried, and then it just like dropped on streaming recently.
All I know is it seems to be similar to the old Goosebumps classic, R.L. Stein's "Say Cheese and Die."
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one.
It's a great one.
I didn't read Goosebumps when I was a kid.
Oh,
so
you
what's
should
the,
read
what's,
it out.
what's the premise of either that story or
well,
this
the premise
movie?
of Chase Cheese and Die is they take pictures and you see like skeletons in the pictures, and then the people
Oh,
die.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or probably don't die in the Goosebumps book. They probably come close to mild peril.
I mean, it's a teen horror movie called Polaroid. What more do you need to know?
Looking forward to it. You should catch up on some Goosebumps though.
I
Get some-
should.
Well,
This
okay.
also makes me
good.
want to finally watch 1 Hour Photo, which is not the same
Not
thing.
the same
Not the
thing.
same
Wow,
thing.
not even
But
close.
it's about photos and it's a horror movie, all right?
I could curate a small list of Goosebumps classics, and you can read them in like 3 hours. So
Yeah.
that's or less.
I was gonna say, I was thinking like that's like a toilet read.
Yeah,
Those things
two
are
hours.
quick.
Yeah, they're
Take a
quick.
shit.
They're like
Read a
90
book.
pages or something.
Yeah, and it's funny because like every chapter is like 2.5 pages, and every chapter ends with like a cliffhanger. It's like I opened the door and screamed.
Well,
and
this is-
then the next thing is like, oh, I saw my mom and I wasn't expecting her.
And this is why R.L. Stein is so good at Twitter.
Yes,
He basically invented the
Yeah.
forum.
but yeah, Say Cheese and Die, The Haunted Mask. What are some other Goosebumps essentials?
Oh, there was the what was the ventriloquist doll?
Oh, Night of the Living Dummy. Night of the Living Dummy 2.
Yeah.
Monster Blood. Ooh. Oh. And you get diminishing returns, I think, as they go on. But the classics, the classic run.
There was one about like a werewolf in Pasadena or something.
The Abominable Snowman. of
Abominable
Pasadena.
Snowman.
There was one
Yeah, I
about
remember that one.
alien evil alien eggs.
Yes. So those are the only two I had.
Yeah.
Were those two books?
One that really got under my skin was like something about the Tower of Terror. It was the Tower of London.
Yeah.
And they were trapped in it.
Yeah.
That was some scary shit, my friends.
Stressful.
Curse of
What about Fear Street?
Curse of the Mummy. Never fucked with Fear Street.
That was too adult
It
at
was
the time.
too adult. I was like, oh man, can't wait.
I felt the same way. I was like, that was like R-rated for me as a 8-year-old or whatever.
I think he just brought back Fear Street though.
There's a movie coming out soon, of course.
Damn.
I did read a lot of Michigan Chillers.
Yeah.
Not the same thing, but
Not the same thing.
enjoyable nonetheless.
God, we always sound... This is like ASMR at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
We all just like wind down and let the conversation turn to
great.
something banal and...
Well, here's some real love making for your ear holes. Go get an Amon t-shirt at everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com and follow our fucking social media at AmonCast, EHMON.
And you don't-
EHMONcast. And
You
while
don't-
you're there, instead of trolling us for once, tell us if you're team insanity or team whatever the fuck Steven is going to call his team.
I'm going to call it Team Reality.
Team reality.
Insanity versus
Team
reality.
insanity and team reality.
Insanity
babies.
sounds like a lot more fun. I'm
feel
going to be
like we need
honest.
to be
We're
going
breaking
to
it down here.
skateboard. I feel like we're about to join roller derby teams or start roller derby teams.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah. I'll be the jammer.
The jammer.
All right, guys, it's been great, but we'll see you next time when we watch Polaroid. But until then, we'll miss you. For every horror movie on Netflix, I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Steven.
And I'm Allison
See
with
you
a Y.
See you later.